Hey, welcome back. Today I'll be forging a Wyrm-inspired flint striker and showing how to make char cloth. I make my char cloth in rolls like this. I usually make it out of old cotton t-shirts, but today I thought I'd use some old blue jeans. It's a pretty simple process. Just pack your cloth into a metal container with a few small holes in it, throw it on a fire, and then wait for a bit. You'll want to wait until the smoke and fire just about stop coming out. Don't go too far, or you'll have char cloth that's super brittle. I'll be making the striker out of '01 tool steel. I have a decent amount of it, and it makes pretty good strikers. The first thing I do is just clean up the end of the bar. Here I'm using a little Z-fuller to partition off the bit of metal I want to make the worm's head out of. You can do this over the edge of the anvil or the horn, but I think this does a cleaner job. After that, I'm working on thinning out what will be the neck. I'll speed this up so you don't have to sit through all this. Working over the horn allows you to draw out faster and to get into curves where the edge of the anvil wouldn't be suitable. Just how much faster it is to forge over the horn. I do go back to the face of the anvil to make sure everything's even and squared up. I'm starting to get the length out to where I want it. I'll be leaving it square just because I like how it looks. But if you make one, you can round it out. Here I am using the Z-fuller, again, to make a little transition point between the neck of the worm and the striker body. This Z-fuller is part of the Abana National Curriculum, and I think it's a neat little tool to have around. After I have the transition to the point where I want it, I flatten out the striker body. I don't want it to be too thick or too thin, and I want it to be long enough and look good, and throw some good sparks. I think that's the most important part. Keep it square and uniform as you go. It'll make it easier in the long run. The longer you let a problem persist, the harder it is to fix. This is where I'll start the tail transition. This Z-fuller is definitely earning its keep today. Keeping things square and uniform as I go. Here I am drawing out the tail. Exciting stuff, I know. smaller stock is, the faster it cools off. So I'm having to go back and forth to the forge a lot here. Here I'm refining the shape of the worm's head and neck. I'm using a small hammer because it's easier to be precise. Just making sure the neck's nice and square here. Might as well. Now I'm using a hot chisel to cut out the mouth. I use a plate on my anvil so I don't cut into it. Who do you think I am? Some kind of psychopath who cuts into his anvil for no reason? Nah. Yes, I know some people use the little area to the right as a cutting table, but I'm not one of those people, so I'm not. It took a bit of fiddling around to get this cut looking good. You can always use a file to refine it too. Here I'm drawing out both sides of the mouth. I want them just a little bit longer. Unfortunately, this cools off really fast. using the Z fuller to add a little curve to the mouth. It makes it look more interesting. Again, it takes a little bit of fiddling to get it looking right, but in the end I'm pretty happy with it. Using an eye punch to give it an eye, but I mean, what else would you use an eye punch for? Next is just bending the neck. Having a pair of scrolling pliers or tongs really helps out a lot with this stuff. I actually won this pair. Shout out to Roy at Christ-Centered Ironworks. Now if I was working with just mild steel, I'd probably quench that end to make the bend a little bit easier. But, since this is carbon steel, you do not want to quench it until you're ready to temper. You'd make it too brittle and it could break. Using a cut-off hardy to cut off that tail. Once I'm done using this hardy, I take it out of my anvil. You don't want to leave it in your anvil while you're hammering on something else and not using it. You could risk hitting it with your hand, and that's not good. If there was one thing I'd change about this fire striker, I would leave a little bit more mass at the end of the tail. messing around with it because I didn't like the shape. A rawhide mallet comes in handy here because it won't mar your metal. I do a few normalization cycles because it's a smart thing to do with carbon steel. Since this is O1, I'll be hardening it in oil. This is just vegetable oil, but I preheated it a bit. I want just the striking body to be hard, so I leave the head and tail out of the oil and hold it there until it's no longer hot. I use the back of my hand to check for heat. Here I'm using a file to clean off the scale and a little bit of decarb. If you don't do this, then you won't get good sparks. Might as well take the time here to file off any sharp edges. I thought this page of a magazine was fitting to use for fire starter. Though maybe it would have caught faster if I didn't use a piece of damp magazine. Anyways, I'm happy with how the striker turned out. If you like the content, then I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed, but you don't have to. Thanks for watching.